Hi, it's Rich Tehrani. I'm in the TMC newsroom today. Thank you for watching. Today we're going to talk a little bit about the smart grid space, current events, news. On our program is John Arnold, who is one of the partners at Intelligent Communications Partners. John, how are you?
Just fine, Rich. Good to see you again.
Well, as a foremost thought leader in the smart grid space, I figured you would be a person to talk with about broadband stimulus, government stimulus, and how is money from the government finding its way into the smart grid arena?
Yeah, big topic, right? And you know, it's a core focus on some of the things we talk about on the smart grid portal. And there's a lot of news, but there's also a lot of things to analyze because we're seeing, first of all, the government is kind of driving this market with the the stimulus funding to get smart metering deployments going and kind of seeding the smart grid market. But now following that, you've got the broadband stimulus plan, which is, you know, the administration's big picture idea of getting broadband into as many homes as possible. You know, it's all that kind of competitive stimulus that we get to make ourselves more intelligent and more connected. But on the back of that, of course, is the implication for smart grid, because broadband, yes, gets us into the home and connected to the web, but that also ties to the smart grid and smart home spaces, because
Right.
now what the smart grid is really about is, yes, it's updating the infrastructure, but that's really plumbing. Where it gets really interesting is when you start tying smart grid to the communications networks that ride over the infrastructure of the grid that go into the home. And now they connect those smart meters and our home appliances and our programmable thermostats, etc., and even our vehicles into the grid. And at that point, now you've got this new connection of two-way communication, real-time data, and this is a whole world of information that the utilities have never really had to deal with before, but it opens up huge opportunities. But the argument is, this is another reason why broadband is good for the economy, because it is really kind of the driver that's going to make our utility infrastructure more efficient, more productive, and of course that ties into, you know, green energy, addressing climate change, carbon emissions, you know, all the things that play very well on the global stage of making the planet more livable and sustainable. And now you've got this coming and say, okay, well, see, this is another reason why we need broadband. And to an extent that's absolutely true. And the utilities, it's really are the ones who this message is directed at, because they have been doing things their way for a long time, of course, because they're regulated and protected and all that. But it's a bigger picture, and this is another angle to say to utilities, yes, you're a monopoly, but at the same time, there is a bigger picture here with smart grid, that you're really enabling and empowering us as consumers to be equal partners
Right.
in how we use, consume, and pay for energy. And you know what? The input from consumers is very valuable, and it will really help make the utilities more efficient and make, you know, the planet greener and all those nice things. So there's kind of a feel-good, high-level argument to say, broadband, we got to have it. And so, as we all know, the U.S. is well behind many of the industrialized countries with broadband penetration. So this is yet another reason to push for it. And so the utilities are really the ones who I think this message is largely aimed at. I think in our homes, we don't have an issue with broadband. We all want it for all kinds of reasons.
Sure.
But most people aren't thinking about the smart grid benefits and why it matters. But now this is another angle. So again, the consumers, as they get educated and say, geez, I can do all these wonderful things. I didn't know that I could power, you know, say I could charge my car overnight. I could do all kinds of things with running my laundry more efficiently. And people want to do those things. They want to save money, and they want to be greener. They want to have a way to be more efficient and sort of energy conscious. So that's another benefit of having broadband. It gives them the tools to do that.
So the government is basically greasing the wheels for something that the utilities want. They want a more efficient grid. They want to be able to deliver power more, I guess, productively, more efficiently as well. And then you've got the consumer who's looking to save money. Obviously, they want to reduce brownouts. They want devices that are better for the environment, most likely. But really, it comes down to cost savings in many cases, and that's what they'll get out of this, right?
Eventually they will, but you know, short term, the scary part is our energy prices are going up. It's funny how when you can all of a sudden manage energy consumption more accurately, costs are going up. So there's going to be a little bit of a bumpy road for the early going of this that says, why are my bills going up? Well, eventually they will go down because they will, once the kinks are worked out of making this technology work right and getting a better balance between the supply of energy and what it is actually costing to produce, that will smooth itself out. But much like in the early days of VoIP, look at all the problems we had initially. People thought VoIP would never last because it had so many deficiencies. But those problems were solved, and now VoIP is carrier grade. And I think you'll see the same thing here in the smart grid space. There'll be this little rocky start, but people know this is the future, and you'd be foolish to ignore it. So that's why the stimulus plan around broadband makes sense. It won't be perfect initially, but I think, bear with it for maybe 2 or 3 years, and we'll wonder how we live without it once it gets all formally in place.
So really everything's aligned, right? The desire from the consumer, the desire from the producers, the desire from the government, and the funding. So all the ducks are in a row for the smart grid to continue its growth.
In theory, they are. Yeah, the utilities are still, they still are laggards in a lot of ways, but
Sure.
they're certainly coming in, and this is
and it's not cheap, right? None of this stuff is cheap for the utilities, right? You can't blame them for having at least some sticker shock if something's working as is.
That's or not working well, but they're not in the business of reducing your consumption. They're reducing the business of maximizing your consumption. So they have to kind of. They're
some utilities, not to interject too much and interrupt you, but some utilities are maxed. So those guys have to minimize consumption,
very true.
right?
Yeah, that's exactly
or
right.
Or build a new plant.
Yeah, which they don't want to do. It's just too expensive and too time consuming and all. Sure. So there is a bit of a realignment of kind of priorities that has to happen here.
And you and I have seen firsthand what happens when technology evolves and the providers don't keep up, having seen the transformation of IP communications totally change the landscape of traditional circuit switched telecom from the last couple decades that had to rapidly transform to IP. So those companies that wait risk falling behind and potentially seeing new entrants come into the market to the extent that that's possible.
Exactly, and that last point's the big one because they are protected monopolies, and in time I think that's going to have to change. It's just the realities of the way this technology is evolving. Telecom was deregulated. I don't think it's going to quite happen the same way in the energy market, but something will have to give because the consumer has too much stake in the game now with smart grid. It will have to become a little bit more even in terms of the balance of power.
It'll certainly be interesting to watch, and I should note and tell the viewers that if they want to learn more and follow you and what TMC is doing in this space in terms of reporting and news analysis, they can go to smart-grid.tmcnet.com, and they're invited into the Smart Grid Summit, which is taking place October 2010 in Los Angeles.
That's right. That's right. And anyone who comes to the portal, by the way, can subscribe. We have a newsletter that's free. And of course, the content is always free, and we welcome your comments and ideas. We're very open about that.
Thanks for being on the program, John. It's great.
Sure thing, Rich. Okay.